So dudes, it's your boy Tuhu. During our last Star Rail preview stream, MiHoYo dropped one hell of a bombshell announcement, a collab with Fate Stay Night. And let me tell you, as someone who's wasted the last 7 years of his life playing this fucking game, and called himself the God of Gacha in a previous video, whoo boy, I don't know how else to put it, but this collab is pretty much my turf. So naturally, I want to talk about it a bit. Might as well, we got some time to kill considering the collab's supposed to come out next year. So let me start by mentioning that earlier this year, it was reported that a team of Star Rail devs went to go interview Kinoko Nasu, the dude who created Fate. Because of this interview, we started getting rumors about a possible Star Rail and Type Moon collab of some kind, because it's not exactly every day that you get to interview the perverted eggplant. I mean, we don't even know what Nasu looks like apparently, to give you an idea of how substantial this interview was. Like, I remember hanging out in Brack's phone stream and chatting with him about what the likelihood of a Star Rail and FGO collab would be. And at the time I was like, well, like I wouldn't count it out per se, but it wouldn't be an FGO collab, it would be a general Fate collaboration instead. That, and I wouldn't believe it until I see it, as in until it's officially confirmed, I'll take the rumors with a grain of salt. Turns out, it's real, baby. For those of you who aren't familiar with FGO or Fate in general, what I've just said might have sounded a little bit strange. Like, what the hell's the difference, right? What do you mean it wouldn't be an FGO collab and it'd be an overall Fate collab? Like, aren't those two the same? First things first, Fate Stay Night is a visual novel that originally came out all the way back in 2004, written by Kinoko Nasu, and it took its 20th anniversary to finally get an official English release that very recently came out, but hey, at least we have it now. And perfect timing too, in case you're interested in learning more about Fate for the collab. You can go buy it on Steam, and hopefully by now they've fixed whatever weird localization issues it had at launch. FGO, or Fate Grand Order for short, is a mobile game that uses the Fate IP to expand on its universe. More technically, it's an alternate universe to the original Fate timeline. Very similar actually to how Star Rail is probably an alternate universe to the original Honkai Impact timeline. So you can see how this collab sort of makes sense thematically, at least. I say probably since I admittedly don't know Honkai Impact lore, so apologies if I got any of that wrong. But not only are Fate's and FGO stories different because they take place in different timelines, but the way they're treated as intellectual properties is vastly different as well in the context of collaborations. Nasu has let Fate Stay Night collab with a lot of other IPs, including gacha games. The ones I know of are collabs with Shadowverse, Valkyrie Chronicles, and even Battle Cats of all things, and now, most recently, Star Rail. FGO, on the other hand, has never had what I, or even many of you guys, would call a proper collaboration event. Because when you think of a gacha collab, right, you think of, oh, like one gacha brings in characters from a completely different IP and turns them into characters for their game. FGO just doesn't do that for whatever reason, because while technically they have done collab events, it's always been within the Fate universe itself. Kara no Kyokai, Fate Zero, Prisma Ilia, Apocrypha, CCC, Case Files, Requiem, even FGO Arcade. I think Grail Eye was technically a collab with like a limited time app or something, and the Learn with Manga event was a collab with a fan artist whose fan-made manga about the game got so popular back in the day that the devs hired the guy to do their April Fools art every year except for one, I think. And eventually they just said fuck it, and just gave the dude a full-blown event of his own. Two actually, if you count all the Statesmen. I'm sure there's quite a few reasons why FGO never collabs outside of its own IP, but the one that's probably the most readily apparent is that FGO, like MiHoYo's games, takes its own story way too fucking seriously. Remember earlier how I said that FGO takes place within the Fate universe just as a different timeline, but they've treated it as a mainline game, and since Fate lore goes pretty hard, to say the least, everything in the game has to be explained in lore. So for a collab with an external IP to happen in FGO, or even vice versa where another gacha game is somehow able to get an FGO collab, that would need to be explained in FGO's universe as to how that's possible. Or, now that I think about it, it might just be that Nasu just doesn't want FGO to collab with anything right now because its story is still ongoing and doesn't want any external IP to come in and influence it. Whereas Fate Stay Night, it's a visual novel and its story is already concluded, so, you know, there's that. Oh, that, and it's been around for 20 years now, so Nasu probably doesn't mind getting free money from whatever collabs it ends up getting. All this to say, that's the reason why Star Rail is collabing specifically with Fate Stay Night and not FGO. So, unfortunately for these people, you will not see Astolfo show up in this collab because he doesn't show up in FSN. He shows up in FGO and APOC and maybe Extella, I forget. And more to the point, this is not going to be an FGO collab either, which means unfortunately you're not going to see characters who are from FGO show up here. So the popular FGO waifus that even non-FGO players probably recognize, like Ishtar, Erish, Jalter, Morgan, Nero, Kama, Raiko, or Scotty, just to name a few, are not going to be here. Rather, this is a collab with Fate, the visual novel that is. And more importantly, it's with Unlimited Bladeworks specifically, or UBW for short, and that in and of itself is worth talking about too. For those of you who aren't familiar with Fate, the original visual novel that is, it has 3 main routes, one for each of the 3 main heroines. The route with Saber, which funnily enough doesn't have an official name, so we just end up calling it the Fate route, Heaven's Feel, which is Sakura's route, and Unlimited Bladeworks, or Rin's route. As you saw in the images of the various Fate collabs that I showed before, they were all also with specific routes of Fate. Now that I think about it, there are 2 Heaven's Feel collabs and 1 UBW collab in the examples I gave here, so I wonder if Nasu's kinda like just alternating the routes for whichever collab comes next, or it could just be that David and the other Star Rail devs just really like UBW the most and so requested a collab with that specifically, or if they just knew that UBW is the most easily marketable one since it got an anime adaptation back in like 2014 or 2015 or whatever, which is recent enough and, if I remember it right, should still be good enough for a modern audience in, current year. So y'all can go watch it somewhere if you want to get a better idea of what this collab's going to be about. Or again, just go read the visual novel on Steam if you're into those. Whatever the reason, this means that the possible characters who will show up in the collab with Star Rail next year, at least for me, are pretty clear. UBW's main characters are Shiro, Rin, Archer, and Gilgamesh. Shiro is the main protag, Rin is the main girl for this route, Archer is her servant, and Gilgamesh is the main antagonist. So you should expect these 4, or at least some of these 4, to show up as collab characters next year. At the very least, Archer is all but confirmed thanks to the new collab trailer that MiHoYo put out for Gamescom.
これはまたとんでもないマスターに引き当てられたもの。
Lastly, I've heard some people wonder whether this is even gonna be an actual collab event at all, right? That maybe this is just some, like, I don't know, weird merch collab or something like that. Or a situation like Alloy in Genshin, where MiHoYo just kinda stuck her in Genshin Impact because Sony told them to or whatever, as part of their PlayStation deal. I do think this will be an actual in-game collaboration event. This won't be another Alloy incident, but instead something MiHoYo will actually care about. Remember that Chinese developers grew up with a lot of the same animes and mangas that us older weebs did, and thus are huge fans. That and the Fate IP, for those of you who aren't aware, is absolutely massive over in the East. And fun fact, FGO was one of, if not the biggest gacha game in the world before Genshin Impact came along. Even to this day, all they gotta do is put out a highly requested character as a new 5-star character into gacha, and they'll sweep the gacha sales charts, as long as Uma Musume doesn't do the same at the same time. So I find it really unlikely that MiHoYo is gonna fuck this event up, at least I sure fucking hope they don't. What I will say though is that I do find the timing of the original collab announcement itself to be a bit strange. Like, why bother announcing this collab like a year beforehand like this, right? Why not just announce it much closer to when the event will actually happen, so that way, the hype is a lot fresher and people don't have to wait as long to play it. But now that I think about it, they might have announced it this early anyway to line up with the new Fate Stay Night remaster on Steam, so I don't know. Future Tuhu here. At the time of me writing and recording this part of the video, we just got the 2.7 preview stream and our first teaser for 3.0, and even though we didn't get another teaser for the Fate UBW collab, I've got a few more things that I want to point out. First is the new path that they teased for Aglia, Remembrance. We've known for a little while thanks to Twitter leaks that 3.0 is gonna debut a new character archetype, a summoner type character who can summon a servant of some kind that'll act as a 5th character for you to control your team, and this this was basically confirmed as soon as we saw Sunday's kit, which specifically lets them double buff summoner type allies. So it's safe to assume that this new remembrance path will be dedicated to this new archetype. Second, the more I think about it, the more I feel like the summoner archetype was created specifically for this UBW collab. The summoner archetype is basically the whole master and servant dynamic in Fate, and so right now I'm inclined to believe that Shiro and Rin will be playable characters since they're the masters, and in the context of Star Rail, they'd be the summoners, and their skill would be to summon their servants, or however it is that, summoner type characters in Star Rail are able to call their servants onto the field. This does leave the question of how Gilgamesh specifically will be implemented though. Spoiler warning if y'all haven't watched UBW or another Fate anime called Fate Zero yet, but I feel like it's necessary in order for me to explain how I think Gil might be put into Star Rail. As I mentioned earlier, Gilgamesh is the main protagonist of the Unlimited Blade Works route in Fate Stay Night, so naturally I think he'll most likely be in the collab too, with Star Rail that is. The problem is that his master is a guy by the name of Kotomine Kirei, a major supporting character who plays a big role in other routes too. He's the guy who goes Yorokobe Shonen if you've seen some memes about him. But I'm not sure if MiHoYo is gonna put him into the game, because we already have Shiro and Rin, the actual main characters of UBW. If MiHoYo plans to sell Shiro and Rin as limited time 5-star gacha characters, then there'd be no room for Kirei to be a 5-star himself. The obvious solution to this would be to just make him a 4-star, but that would be really weird since that would also mean that Gilgamesh, his servant, would also be a 4-star, and yeah, I'm not too sure how I'd feel about that, given that he's a 5-star servant in FGO. This leads me to the third and last thing I want to talk about, and it's something that worries me personally. There is a small chance that the UBW collab can just be a cosmetic collab, as in, instead of making the Fate characters their own standalone playable characters, there's a chance that MiHoYo will just put in the Fate characters as skins for pre-existing Star Rail characters. The biggest indicator of this possibly happening, again, it's only a small chance, but a chance nonetheless, is the fact that some of the 3.0 characters that MiHoYo dripped look like they could be used as skin holders, if that makes any sense, for the Fate characters in the future. Maide, if that's how I pronounce his name, could be the Gilgamesh placeholder, especially with his tattoos that have a pretty striking resemblance to Gilgamesh's own tattoos in his 3rd Ascension in FGO, and Anaxa, or Anaxa, however you say his name either, literally has a command spell on the back of his hand. Maybe I'm just overthinking it and being a little bit too paranoid, hopefully that's the case, but it'll be severely disappointing if the collab characters in, the Star Rail and UBW collab just end up being skins for various 3.0 Star Rail characters. I remember another gacha game called Counterside, a game that Mr. Pokey should be quite familiar with, that did a collab with the Hololive EN Gen 1 girls from Hollow Myth, that is, about last year or so. And I thought it was so fucking lame that the Hollow girls were just skins for pre-existing characters in that game. Mainly because of the fact that because they are just skins, if you want to use them, you have to roll the characters who can use those skins in the first place. I strongly believe that if a gacha game is gonna do an in-game collaboration, it should be a proper gacha banner that can give you the collab characters as their own standalone units, not as skins that require you to have other characters first to be able to use them in the first place. The whole point of collabs is to get new players to come play your game, and if they can roll the collab characters, then they have a great reason to stick with your game and keep playing it, at least for a little while longer. So making collab units just skins for characters that are already in the game defeats that purpose, since new players are going to quickly realize that they gotta grind the game first to even use those skins at all. And those are my thoughts on the collab so far. Hopefully, I've been able to give you guys some insight into it as someone who's a bit more knowledgeable on the Fate side of things. And hopefully, fingers crossed, if I can cross them properly, there we go, MiHoYo will make this a proper collab and not just some, bullshit costume event or something like that. So, if you enjoyed the video, make sure to like and subscribe for more gacha content. I've also got a Patreon, so check it out if you want to see your name show up at the end of these videos. And I dual stream to both YouTube and Twitch, twitch.tv/ToeSniper98. So stop by if you want to talk more about the collab, or Fate, or just gachas in general. And all my socials are in the description, as usual. Thanks for watching, be cool y'all, and I'll holla at you next time.